Hi, I'm Michael Depp, editor of TV News Check, and this is Inside the Media, the show that looks at the business of the news and the people who make it. This week, we're in beautiful uptown St. John, and I'm talking with Julia Wright, host of CBC St. John's Information Morning. I'll be right back with that conversation with Julia. Welcome, Julia Wright, to Inside the Media.
Michael, thank you for having me. It's great to meet you in person.
It's great to be here in your hometown city of St. John. It's a beautiful day, it's summer here. And Julia, you are a native daughter of this city, a Johnner. And so I'm wondering, what has it been like for you to host a show, a morning show, in your hometown, as opposed to, say, working in another city like Montreal or Halifax? How does it feel doing this at home among your own people?
Local journalism, it is a dying art. There are so many things that get outsourced to bigger cities now, and there's an absence of kind of people who have their feet on the ground here, who grew up in this place, and who have that kind of lifelong understanding of local issues. The work that everyone does, like a national reporters, the big stories, all of that is so important, but there are also stories that happen right here at home that can get overlooked if you don't have people who are actually living here and working here and have the contacts here. So for me, it's been a huge privilege. I always wanted to have this job. It's for me, when I was starting out, I was freelancing and I was doing kind of different things. I had a full-time job working at the city market, which is right behind us.
Yeah.
I was working in a kitchen and sort of writing on the side. And I always loved radio. And so this kind of opportunity is huge. And I love every day. Every day is different. And of course, getting up at 4 a.m, there's some challenges associated with that, but
Right.
I really wouldn't trade it. It's a great gig.
And of course, every story is a local story, isn't it? So the pandemic changed the way that everybody worked. Certainly at the time, we used a lot more Zoom in reporting. But now that we're hopefully more or less on the other side of it, with most of it in the rearview mirror, how have the ways that you changed your work during that period, what elements of that have stayed with you now, and how are you working and approaching your job differently than before?
It's interesting because I don't know if it is in the rearview mirror. We're kind of in the middle of a COVID wave right now in New Brunswick. So I haven't left behind a lot of the things that we've been doing for the past few years yet. I'm still kind of cautiously waiting to see what happens with some of this stuff before I say, okay, I'm going to go back to the way things were. I don't even know if that's possible, Michael. I don't even know if any of us are going to go back to the way things were. But some of the things that I've learned over the past couple of years through this is that kind of in-person connection that you make with people, there's no replacement for that. Zoom and all of these tools that we've gotten so used to are amazing. They're amazing tools, but that kind of face-to-face interaction and the rapport that you build with people when you actually go to the place where they live or they work and connect with them in that way, you get a level of sort of honesty and of connection that you don't get in any other way. So I've really missed that when that really wasn't possible, in the dark times that I think you're talking about, when we were at the crazy height of the pandemic. That changed the whole gig because previously, we could have guests in the studio, we could go out into people's homes, we could, do a lot of things that became kind of impossible, back in the winter of 2021 or 2020. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the things that, have changed that I'm going to carry forward, it's just the value of getting out there and making sure that you still make those connections in whatever way is safe to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Has there been an upshot though? Widening the net, because you can use Zoom to reach people further afield than perhaps you might have before. Has that been something that you found that
for you, I can see why that has been a huge thing, because in your show, you're interviewing people from all over the world, which is awesome. We've done that too. We've cast our net wide for experts on ventilation and things like that, mm-hmm. that we don't have access to in a smaller market like St. John, or COVID epidemiologists, things like that maybe wouldn't have been the first thought for our morning show necessarily before COVID. Because the pandemic has been a global phenomenon and it's something that's affected every country in the world, it has kind of given us an opportunity to look beyond New Brunswick or beyond Canada to be like, hey, what are the trends? What are things that we should be doing that other countries are maybe doing better, or that, we can understand better if we look at it through this bigger lens? So it's kind of just driven home the fact that, to use like the phrase that we're all so sick of, like we're all in this together, we are. And it's kind of taken me from this hyper-local St. John focus to a wider New Brunswick focus for sure, but also like a broader lens in terms of like North American issues and things like that too. So
you're getting some time away from your morning host duties this summer and getting a little bit of a chance to range further afield and do some traveling around the province and reporting from different parts of the province. What's behind that? And what, for you, what do you find to be the advantages of doing that kind of work, and how does the audience benefit from that?
Well, I am getting a chance this summer to do something different, like you said. Normally, my routine is really, really rigid. I get up at 4, I'm on the air at 5:55, World Report kicks in at 6:10 and 7:10 and 8:10. Every minute, every second actually of my morning is timed out and ruled by the clock, because that's the nature of a radio show where you have these cut-ins with national news. So it's gone from that to a different sort of plan. I and my colleagues, Shauna Brewer and Jean Armstrong, are going to be out this summer doing stories in communities across New Brunswick. So Jean was just in Woodstock last week, doing what we call a community bureau there, going out in the community, local farmers markets, meeting with local people, bringing swag, bringing a vehicle up, and just touring around to see what people are talking about. Because, like we were just saying with the pandemic and with our circles sort of becoming smaller, and the fact that our schedule is the way that it is, it's harder to get out and do those things. So this summer, later on this summer actually, I'm going to be going to Charlotte County for a couple days. First for recon, like kind of just touring around and talking to people. I'm going to be in Grand Manan later in July, and then going back to Grand Manan in Charlotte County in August to do a similar kind of community learning bureau. So it's exciting. I'm still kind of contributing to the provincial morning show, Information Morning, in the summer, bringing stories to the air. Just did one last week with a St. John sailor who was selected for this awesome opportunity on a racing yacht called the Maiden in New York. And I'm working on some other kind of investigative stuff that's going to become clear in the coming weeks. So it's a chance to just mix things up, because a change is good always when you're in this field. It's good to not get too kind of complacent or comfortable with your routine. And by sort of, being on a different schedule and opening things up to getting out there again, I'm finding that it's given me a lot of energy when I think about coming back in the fall. So, yeah.
Well, talking of change, CBC itself as an organization has kind of an unusual thing, that there's a lot of programming change outs in the summer. It tries out some podcasts as on the air to see, I think, how they're going to do potentially as shows. Hosts get a little bit of a break to do like what you're doing and travel a bit, and substitute hosts come in. It strikes me as a little bit unusual for a news organization to have that kind of flexibility. Is that something that to your knowledge is unique to CBC?
I don't know if it's unique to CBC. The whole notion of having a summer show is nothing new. Lots of shows have done that for years, like Morningside did it years ago, and I think it is a chance to, we all have skills that don't get necessarily tapped all the time in the morning show role. Like a lot of us started off as journalists rather than hosts, for example, and then just the grind of putting out a daily radio show, like you don't get a chance to flex those muscles as much. And so I think it's just a matter of, in a small market, you have to tap everyone for every skill that they have and make sure that people are sort of being used to the best of their abilities also. So I think it's just a chance to freshen things up.
So now that you are a little bit untethered from the desk and you're able to go out in communities and talk to people, what are you learning from talking to people? When you get kind of out of the media bubble of people we routinely talk to, experts in this or that, and you talk to average people in communities who are just living their lives so far this summer, what are you picking up about what's on their minds, their anxieties, where they're focused?
I think people are focused on emerging out of this depressed kind of insular COVID period and whatever is next on the other side of it. I think there's a sense that the phase of this pandemic as we've known it is over, and that we're moving into something new. Now, what that is or what that's going to look like when we're all kind of inside again in the fall, it's not clear. But what I do know, talking to people, is that a lot of people are struggling with this and struggling with all the losses that have come over the past 3 years, whether it is jobs. The tourism industry has taken a huge hit here, which is a massive issue for New Brunswick.
Right.
And just generally all of this polarized rhetoric around pandemic restrictions and politics has really taken a toll on how people see their neighbors. It's made it harder for people to feel that this is a unified community, I guess. There's so many different views out there about what the government should be doing or what they have done so far. It's there's a lot of resentment that's built up over the past few years, and we see that a lot in media too. It's hard to be online right now for a lot of journalists.
Yes.
It's hard to sort of to hear a lot of the conspiracy theories that people are promoting, and when you feel that you have a responsibility to bring people the truth. So that's the main issue that seems to be preoccupying people these days. It's still kind of just coming out of this and seeing what's on the other side.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because mistrust is a major issue that everyone who works in the media is dealing with right now. For you, how does that intersect your career personally? And then what do you do when you're confronted with that by a viewer, listener, or reader, who could be sometimes confrontational, maybe sometimes less so, online or in person? How do you handle that?
I listen. I try to listen. It can be easy to dismiss people who have radically different views than you about what the truth is on this. But we will not get anywhere unless we hear people out. Why do people believe the things that they do is a question that's always been interesting to me. How do you know that what you think is, how do you know that? How do you think what you think is true? Why do you think that it's true? Trying to interrogate those questions about how people got to that point is how I tend to respond to it. Now, fortunately, unlike a lot of my colleagues, maybe nationally or whatever, I don't get a lot of online hate compared to some people that I know. It's a huge problem in journalism, and I definitely experience it. But I don't know why, but it seems like people are generally pretty good around here, with me at least. I find that.
Is it because you're from here? They know you from?
It could be partly that. I mean, I think people do respond to that. They, in the town like this, everyone knows everyone. And whether they knew my parents, or they know me through friends of friends, there's a kind of hesitancy for some of that really outward, really aggressive kind of hate. People will disagree with you, and they'll do it quite vocally online. But when it comes to actually being harassed while I'm out shooting or doing my job, that doesn't happen as much here yet. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but so far so okay.
Well, when you get into these interactions with people and you start to interrogate how they're coming at you and what their concerns are, their vantage point, how do those interrogations go? Are people responsive to that so far? Are they comfortable with it, and do they want to have a conversation, or do you find that some people are more walled off?
I think people are fairly willing to have a debate about this because they feel that they are armed with the facts as they see them. But what my understanding of it is that COVID is unbelievable. We've never dealt with anything like this before. It is really scary. And it's really hard to accept that a lot of the things that we took for granted before this period in our lives are not coming back. Mm-hmm. When all of this news came out in March 2020, I too struggled with a sense of disbelief. Are you seriously going to cancel every event and every holiday, and are flights really going to be grounded, and are we really going to have a state of emergency enacted in New Brunswick? I mean, I too struggle with those feelings, and so when I see someone who is struggling with the same thing and maybe in denial about certain aspects of this, I can actually really relate to that, because I can fully accept why people would struggle to wrap their mind around what we've been dealing with. So I think if you approach it from that point of view with empathy and sort of try to remember a time in your life as a journalist where you've maybe felt the same way, or the difference is that a lot of folks aren't sure where they can get information that's trustworthy right now. And so they're relying on Facebook, for example, to educate themselves about epidemiology and the issues with COVID. I mean, I just try to sort of meet people where they are and have a real conversation, and not get into, and keep the tone kind of respectful and level. And I find so far that has been serving me well in the gig.
CBC itself is often a focal point for criticism. People feel it's excessively left-leaning, or they just hurl out fake news at it altogether. How do you respond to that, and how do you feel that CBC is seen, and maybe the work that it needs to do to express what it's trying to do perhaps more clearly, or is it doing a great job being what it is right now?
I mean, I can't speak for the whole organization. All I can sort of focus on and control is the work that is in front of me today. What am I working on today that I can make sure is airtight, factually accurate, fair, and balanced? What am I doing daily that I can, ensure is as good as it can be? I mean, that's kind of how I approach it. It's like each interview, each story, each photo that you publish is all an expression of sort of your values as a journalist. And whether the organization kind of lives up to all that, I mean, I'm not sure. All I can sort of control is the work that I do and that my team does on a day-to-day basis. And I know that in terms of the truth and fake news and all those things, that doesn't enter in. No one's spinning or faking anything in the newsroom that I work in. So I mean, I just kind of have to know who I am as a journalist and not really listen to that kind of like that smear campaign stuff that some people are engaged in with CBC.
Right.
Yeah.
It's, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, it's very hard to be a news consumer right now, or a news producer. I mean, you have a litany of stories that are terrible news, cascading one story upon another. There's this sort of low-riding malaise, and it's really easy to be overwhelmed by this. A lot of people are just checking out altogether, and a lot of people are leaving the profession because it has become, it's such a downer. It's so difficult to process as a human being. So I wonder how, from the standpoint of what you're able to do as a journalist and a host, how can you help curb that problem? What's within your agency to do to try to ameliorate that?
Fortunately, there's a lot that you can control in that. I can't control the war in Ukraine and the Omicron wave and the looming threat of climate change. You know what I mean? None of those things are within my power to control. But what I can do is set a tone, which is a reasonable tone and an upbeat one in the morning for the people who listen to the show. Also, not to focus relentlessly on everything that's wrong, but also to try to find the light, to try to find the young, cool people doing amazing things in this province, which are everywhere, but you've got to look for them, right? So yes, we have a responsibility to bring people those tough stories and to be tough on people in power and hold them to account and all of those things. But I also try to balance that with humor and a bit of levity, because I find that helps me when I'm feeling that it's all just a downer and that this is really hard, because it can be, and it can be depressing, of course. We've all had those moments, and I've had those moments when I'm getting up in the dark and walking to work like, all right, let's go, let's do this again. But there is always something that brings me out of that. And usually it's a guest, usually it's a conversation I'm having with someone where I learn something, or I think about something in a new way, or they make me laugh. And no matter how dark things have gotten over the past little while, those moments always exist, like every day. So I'm grateful for that.
And so every show, as you're putting it together, do you look at the rundown and say, no, we need to have something in here to counterbalance the darkness, because there's too much that day?
We do have those conversations. And it's not about, waving a bright and shiny thing in front of people to distract them from the real issues. It's just realizing that life is light and dark, and that by embracing the light, we can handle sort of the darkness that will inevitably follow, I suppose. So it's all about giving people a bit of a break and a little bit of a new way of sort of framing things, maybe when things have been really bad with the pandemic or with unemployment or with whatever, just to sort of remind people that we are a community and that CBC has this amazing power to sort of galvanize people and bring them together. And that all this division that we see and debate that we see is only one part of who we are as New Brunswickers.
So as a local journalist working within a very large national, even international organization, what do you want people outside of this province of New Brunswick to know or understand about this place that they may get wrong, or that you feel like there may be misperceptions? And what would you want to sort of prioritize about the image or a more accurate portrayal perhaps of New Brunswick than circulates?
New Brunswick is encountering this interesting tension between what people think it is like here and what it's actually like here, maybe for the first time, because for decades and decades we've been trying to get people to move here and trying to attract new immigration to New Brunswick, and now finally people are doing it, and we never could have predicted this level of interest in moving to New Brunswick. And a lot of the time when people arrive here, they have a perception that it is going to be like it was wherever they lived before, except smaller and prettier with cheaper real estate. And that sadly is like not.
The cheaper real estate's going away.
The cheaper real estate's going away. There's, maybe you might have a difficulty finding a family doctor or a private school for your kids, or a vegetarian grocery store. You know what I mean? Like all of these things that people sort of take for granted in larger cities. They come here and they're like, what? You don't have those things? And I kind of feel bad for some of the folks who have moved here just for the cheap real estate, for example, who maybe didn't realize that things might be tough finding a job, for example, if they can't work remotely suddenly anymore.
Right.
All of those things. So I think that there are some maybe misperceptions about what New Brunswick is, or the kind of, lifestyle that you can expect here. But I hope that for all these folks that take the plunge and move here, that there will be other things that they do find to kind of enjoy while they're here, even if it wasn't what they expected.
There is a palpable difference here from just a couple of years ago. I mean, it definitely seems to be more of an influx of people. You feel the kind of surge of people coming in. New businesses are starting that weren't there, even in smaller towns that I've been in across the province. Does that, for you now, does that open up a whole raft of new story possibilities? Are you excited by new stories you can tell by newcomers here, and new perspectives that you wouldn't have just had a couple of years ago?
I love that. It is cool, isn't it? To see places that haven't changed in forever suddenly see this inswell of new people and new ideas and new businesses. I think it's amazing. I also hate change. That's why I live in New Brunswick. So it's hard sometimes, because all of these places and things that I've taken for granted my whole life, in some cases, are changing right now.
They've been discovered now, right? The city market is not,
Yeah, it's not a hidden gem. I don't know if the market was ever a hidden gem, but yeah, some of those things that no one knew about are now in the mainstream conversation. And I think that the more people sort of can appreciate our province, the better, obviously. But I do sort of keep some of these things just for myself, just to sort of, enjoy in the way that I always did before all this change.
So, personally speaking, what's up for you next? What do you want to tackle that you haven't had a chance to professionally yet and you want to engage with?
This summer is going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds, because like you said, I've been set free. I'm untethered from the morning show. So I am right now working on a couple of stories that will be coming out in the next few weeks, which I'm excited about, and just having time to sort of breathe and think. And as creative people, often we don't get that in a newsroom environment. The pace is so relentless, and you don't have a lot of time to just sort of let ideas percolate and develop sources and do the in-depth kind of stuff that you want to do. So that's my next kind of horizon. That's what I'm doing. And I'm looking forward to coming back in the fall and seeing what the show kind of sounds like. And we're going to make some kind of changes over the summer too. We got some planning that we're doing. So I'm excited to see what's next.
And CBC has a very rich digital platform, essentially, where you can do some longer form storytelling. They are very experimental in the kinds of storytelling devices that are used. Obviously, the podcasting platform, CBC Listen platform, is very comprehensive, and there's a lot of creative flexibility there. So maybe some of your work will show up in longer form than you've been constricted to so far?
Definitely. I love doing those longer form online pieces. That's kind of my first love. Before I was hosting the show, I worked as a digital reporter, an online reporter, and taking photos and putting all of that together is a great passion of mine. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that as well.
Great. And just lastly, what do you see as the biggest challenges in front of journalists like yourself right now? What are the things that you're going into kind of wary about, or looking at some of the steeper hills that you have to climb?
I think attracting new people into journalism is a challenge that I think a lot of newsrooms are facing, especially in smaller towns. Like developing that kind of homegrown talent and making sure that the opportunities are there for everyone, not just people who took a traditional path to journalism and studied at St. Thomas and got funneled through that. Like that's a great way to get started in New Brunswick, but I think that we need to think outside the box when it comes to who we hire and making sure that all of those voices are represented in our newsroom. So we have a wonderful program running right now at CBC to sort of attract young Indigenous journalists to come work for us. It's an amazing opportunity for people whose voices haven't traditionally been prioritized in our storytelling to come on board and learn some skills, because a lot of this stuff they don't teach you in school. And I don't have a journalism degree myself. Like I'm an English major, and I needed that mentorship and kind of on-the-job training to get my start in news. So that's a challenge, is like making sure that people know what opportunities are available, and then making sure that we listen to those people and that our storytelling reflects that too. Mm-hmm. So just making sure that top talent actually makes its way to smaller places like St. John and New Brunswick. That's going to be an interesting one to see how that unfolds.
Indeed it is. Well, Julia Wright, CBC, St. John, it has been a pleasure talking to you on your home stomping ground.
Pleasure, Michael.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And that was my conversation with Julia Wright. You can watch past episodes of Inside the Media on CHCO's Facebook page and its YouTube page. Until next time, thanks for watching.